11 greatest seasons in American sports history. To compile this list, we took into account how dominant these championship teams were during the era in which they played. We chose from the 4 most popular professional team sports in the United States: football, basketball, baseball, and hockey. And we also listed the year in which they won the championship. So from the Yankees to football's only perfect season, here's the greatest teams in major American sports history. The 2001 Los Angeles Lakers. Before the Warriors came along and broke their record, the 2001 Lakers had the best postseason winning percentage by going 15-1. Led by the most dominant player in the league, Shaquille O'Neal, and budding superstar Kobe Bryant, the Lakers were fresh off their first championship and were hungry for more when they started the 2000-2001 season. They won 56 games in the regular season before tearing through the playoffs. It would take a legendary performance from Allen Iverson, including the infamous Ty Lue step-over and overtime in Game 1 of the Finals, for the Lakers to finally suffer a postseason loss. This version of the Lakers were their best, and it's hard to argue. They were confident from winning their first ring, and had yet to experience the inner turmoil, specifically between Kobe and Shaq, that would eventually bring an early end to their dynasty a few years later. The 1975 Cincinnati Reds. We threw the best version of the Big Red Machine on this list, partially because we couldn't have the Yankees teams be the only baseball representatives on the list. But also, the 1975 Reds were truly one of the best baseball teams of all time. A machine is an accurate descriptor of their offense. They had the all-time hits leader Pete Rose, as well as Hall of Famers Johnny Bench and Tony Perez, and they all were in top form. Oh yeah, and Joe Morgan, who happened to win the NL MVP that year. In 1975, their pitching stepped up to become a potent weapon alongside their steady, ever-present offense. 3 hurlers, Gary Nolan, Jack Billingham, and Don Gullett, won 15 games while the staff compiled a 3.35 combined ERA. They won 108 games and were only seriously challenged by the Boston Red Sox in the World Series, who took them to an epic, memorable Game 7 series that many consider to be one of the best championship series ever played. The 1983 Philadelphia 76ers. The 80s are remembered for Magic Johnson's Showtime Lakers, the gritty Celtics led by Larry Bird, and the intense rivalry between the two franchises. Michael Jordan was becoming a superstar that would take over in the 90s, and the Detroit Pistons became the bad boys in the later part of the decade. Before any of this happened, though, there was the 1982-83 Philadelphia 76ers. Already led by Hall of Famer Julius Erving and All-Star Maurice Cheeks, the team then acquired free agent Moses Malone in the offseason, essentially creating a super team. They dominated the league with a 65-17 record. Malone, the league MVP that year, made his famous faux prediction when asked how the playoffs would go. He was nearly a prophet, as his team would go 12-1 in the playoffs, sweeping the Magic and Kareem-led Lakers in the finals. The 1939 New York Yankees. This is why a lot of people hate the Yankees so much. It's hard to argue to this day that they've fielded 2 of the best teams in the history of American sports. The 1939 Yankees, led by Joe DiMaggio and Bill Dickey, achieved the largest run differential in baseball history at plus 411. DiMaggio, Dickey, Joe Gordon, and George Selkirk all had huge years, while Hall of Fame pitchers Red Ruffing, who won 20 games, and Lefty Gomez headlined the pitching staff. They won 106 games before going on to sweep the Cincinnati Reds in the World Series. The 2017 Golden State Warriors. The Warriors have been the darlings of the NBA for the past half-decade, and in the past 3 years have started to turn their team into a dynasty. They are one blown 3-1 lead away from having the last 3 NBA championships, and despite coming off a record-breaking 73-win season, they may have just finished their most impressive campaign yet. After acquiring superstar Kevin Durant in the offseason, they breezed through the regular season, winning 67 games. They proceeded to turn the playoffs into a joke, sweeping their way to the finals and compiling a 16-1 record, the best ever in any postseason, before bringing the Larry O'Brien Trophy back to the Bay. The 1985 Chicago Bears. Coincidentally, the only franchise to beat the 1985 Bears were the Dolphins, the only franchise to have an undefeated team in the history of the league. The team was led by head coach Mike Ditka and defensive coordinator Buddy Ryan. Their offense was led by quarterback Jim McMahon and Hall of Fame running back Walter Payton. The stars and what made the team so special, however, could be found on the other side of the ball. Richard Dent, Mike Singletary, and Otis Wilson were standout Pro Bowlers, and William Refrigerator Perry was an up-and-coming rookie. They, like so many of these legendary teams, turned the playoffs into a joke, winning their games by a combined score of 91-10. The 1984 Edmonton Oilers. The 80s Oilers had a string of dominant teams that were led by the great one, Wayne Gretzky, who at the time was a young phenom. The best version of these teams had to be the 83-84 team. They were coming off a Stanley Cup Finals sweep at the hands of the more disciplined and experienced New York Islanders, a series loss that would teach and serve them well for the 83-84 season. They were hungry for a championship all year. Gretzky had absurd numbers, scoring 87 goals and 118 assists, while Paul Coffey would tally 126 points, the second highest ever for a defenseman. Mark Messier and Jari Kurri would also break the 100-point barrier. Glenn Anderson came up with 54 goals, the second most on the team. They set the league record for total goals at 424 while compiling a 57-18-5 record in the regular season. A familiar foe, the New York Islanders awaited them in the Stanley Cup Finals. They were ready, however, and defeated their nemesis with ease 4-1. The 1977 Montreal Canadiens. You know how the Warriors kind of made the entire 2016-2017 basketball season, and especially the playoffs, seem predictable and anticlimactic? Well, that's pretty similar to what the Montreal Canadiens did to hockey in the 1976-77 season. Their record that year? A record-setting 68-12. On average, they scored 2.7 goals a game more than their opponent, and think about just how few goals are normally scored in a hockey game. The team lost just 2 games in the playoffs before sweeping the Boston Bruins to claim the Stanley Cup. They were led by dominant forward Guy Lafleur, who scored 136 points that year, and Hall of Fame goalie Ken Dryden. The 1972 Miami Dolphins. Before and since 1972, no team has gone undefeated in the National Football League. The guys that are still alive from the 72 Dolphins celebrate this fact after the last undefeated team finally takes an L every single football season. It may seem cocky and a bit much, but hey, those guys deserve it. After all, they are the only team to achieve a perfect record in an entire regular season and the postseason in NFL history. They did so thanks to offensive stars Bob Greasy and Earl Morrall at quarterback and Larry Zonka at running back. Their famous, though ambiguous, no-name defense was best in the league. In 2007, their reign as the lone undefeated NFL team in history was seriously threatened by a team that narrowly missed the list, the New England Patriots. They had to wait till the Pats were stunned in the Super Bowl by the New York Giants to celebrate their unique achievement for yet another year. If the Patriots would have won that game, they surely would have had a spot on this list. The 1996 Chicago Bulls. Before the 2015-2017 Warriors spent a hair too much energy to beat the regular season record, the 1996 Chicago Bulls had the best regular season record of all time by going 72-10. It was the perfect storm of opportunity for the Bulls. Led by the Zen master himself, Phil Jackson, they had a well-rested Michael Jordan who had ditched his baseball career and come out of retirement the year before. In his absence, the rest of the lineup, specifically Scottie Pippen, had become infinitely better and learned how to win without their GOAT leader. In the offseason, they picked up Dennis Rodman, one of the game's best rebounders and defenders. Not only did the team post the best offensive rating for the year, but they also had the best defensive marks. They would beat the Sonics 4-2 in the NBA Finals and end the year with a total record of 87-13, the best combined regular season and postseason mark of all time. The 1927 New York Yankees. Ask most baseball people and they'll tell you that, despite having never seen the team play, that the 1927 Yankees were the best team that has ever existed in professional baseball. Their offense was dominating in a way that had never been seen before in the game. They were led by their famous Marauders Row offense. Babe Ruth hit 60 home runs while Lou Gehrig led the team in RBIs with 117. Their pitching staff was nearly as dominant. Led by future Hall of Famers Waite Hoyt and Herb Pennock, the staff would lead the American League with a 3.2 ERA. Their regular season record was a ridiculous 110 wins and just 44 losses, and they swept their way to a World Series title.